Speyside's in a beautiful part of Scotland, up in the northeast. Gordon Macphail was established here back in the 24th of May, 1895. In the first year of training, a young apprentice at the age of 14, John Urquhart joined the business. That was my grandfather. And he worked with the business in all areas, eventually becoming senior partner and sole owner in 1915. His passion for the whisky industry goes before him. His son George joined him in 1933, and in the early 1900s, when they were laying down whisky to go and mature and bottle as a single malt whisky, they were thought to be eccentric by others in the industry because they could have sold that whisky as a blend at a younger age and made their money quicker. They could have made their money 2 or 3 times at the time that the whisky matured as a single malt. But they had that passion for looking to get the best out of a whisky. They could see the potential of whiskies being bottled as a single malt whisky. It's a passion that's transcended 3 generations. I'm Michael Urquhart, part of the 3rd generation of the Urquhart family to be involved at Gordon Macphail.
I'm Laura Urquhart and I'm a member of the 4th generation to be in the business.
I'm Stuart Urquhart. I'm a member of the 4th generation of the Urquhart family to be involved in Gordon Macphail. When John Urquhart started out with Gordon Macphail and when George Urquhart joined in the early 1930s, their ambition was always to own a distillery.
A wish, a desire of both my grandfather and father.
They had a rich heritage of maturing whisky, and it was always my family's dream to own a distillery so they could actually make the whisky as well.
This ambition kind of sat there quietly for a long time. We were very particular in what we were looking for, but eventually in 1993 we managed to go and buy a distillery here at Benromach in Speyside. Benromach itself has been around since 1898. They've been making whisky there most of the time, but when we bought Benromach Distillery in 1993, it had been closed for 10 years. So all the equipment in that time had been taken out. We basically had the water supply and the building, so we could start like an artist with a blank canvas.
My name is Ewan McIntosh. I have devoted my whole career to Scotch whisky. I joined the company straight from university at a time when George Urquhart, Mr. George as I know him, was still working in the business. My official title at the start was Quality Controller. I work with a fantastic library of old whisky samples. The opportunity to learn by experience was invaluable, and that was an area I developed at a great pace. Once we'd bought the distillery, we had a great opportunity to really re-engineer the distillery to the style of whisky that we wanted to produce.
Build on the characteristic of Benromach. Benromach's always had that lovely, fruity, sweet taste with a hint of chocolate. We're a traditional business, we're a traditional family, and we've always looked to go back to the way things were done. We wanted to go back and make a traditional Speyside whisky.
I remember vividly when I started, a Speyside whisky was described as a whisky which was elegant, fruity, but had an element of smokiness to it. Some of that smokiness has disappeared from Speyside.
Prior to the 1960s, the malting went on at the distillery itself. Distilleries were in rural areas, so to go and dry the malt, they were using fires that were fueled by coal and peat. And that slight hint of smoke comes through in a delicious way, and that's what we wanted to go and recreate into Benromach, to capture that essence of the bygone days. We could do this, we knew this because we looked back through our stocks of whiskies. Because we've been laying down whiskies from the majority distilleries in Speyside for over 100 years, we really have an unrivaled, unparalleled selection of single malt whiskies. Scotland's liquid history in one place. We could go and look at these whiskies and see how they developed year by year, decade by decade.
Looking at whisky samples, then understanding how that whisky was produced at that distillery, and being able to actually capture the best of everything and put it into our distillery was just unique and very exciting.
I'm Keith Cruikshank. I was the very first stillman here at the distillery. Coming from the Speyside region, my family all worked in the whisky industry. My father was 28 years as a warehouseman, my brother was the same. Myself and the manager, we had the task of starting up the distillery from scratch. Very seldom do you get that opportunity. This is a very traditional distillery, probably a type of distillery you would have had maybe 100 years ago. We buy the finest malted barley, grown and malted in Scotland, to our specifications. We draw our water source from the Chapelton Springs. The distillery's been drawing this water for over 100 years. We use an old brewer style and distiller style yeast. We are the only distillery possibly in Scotland that still has a combination of distiller's yeast and brewer's yeast, and just to give a richer flavour into the fermentation process. We've got 2 copper stills, as you can see behind me, traditional double distillation in copper pot stills. That's to give us our strength and quality. We don't have any temperature gauges here. We don't have any pressure gauges here. It's a manual distillery. We control it by the skill of the stillman, because every distillation is just that little bit different, which are methods that have been handed down from generation to generation. It's all done by touch and feel, by sound, and especially by sight. Nothing happens here unless the stillman makes it happen. It's almost like a 4th ingredient. There's barley, there's water, there's yeast, and most importantly, there's us. We hand fill every cask at the distillery.
At Benromach, we have a good wood policy, which means that we only use first fill casks. We use a mixture of bourbon and sherry casks. We specify the charring level within each cask, and we specify the type of oak that's used. This allows us to get consistent in flavour and also to get the mellow characters we're looking for time and time again. Dunnage warehouses like this one are the traditional way that whisky's been matured. After it's made, I look after it and check it until the point of bottling. It's all about environment and humidity. Our soils allow the right balance of humidity to develop in a warehouse.
And this is where 2/3 of your flavour comes from, your sweet characters from the oak and everything. It gives its flavour, its aroma, and noticeably the colour. Every year you lose 2.5%, and this is the lovely angel share, as it's called. In the northeast of Scotland we have a lot of happy angels up here, that's for sure.
The distillery reopened in 1998.
I was present when the first spirits ran off the stills with members of the 2nd and 3rd generation of the family. To see the fruits of that labour, the first whisky that Gordon Macphail ever produced, the delight in tasting the whisky and saying, you know, we created that is fantastic.
At the opening of the distillery, I remember how proud and passionate my family were. That kind of pride and passion was really infectious.
Incredibly humbled to be able to say, yeah, I was part of the team that created this.
When we started producing, 10 years time from then was a whole millennium away. I've been at the distillery for 15 years now. I'm the distillery manager at Benromach Distillery in Forres. When they took out the first bottling, that was a very proud moment. That is what we do it for. It's very personal to me, and it is to the guys as well, because there's only 3 of us here making the whisky. So every bottle of whisky, there's maybe just a little bit of us in that bottle.
It is very much a long-term vision, what we do. You can only be a custodian for a certain amount of time.
My role is very much about the here and now, but also very much about the future as well.
I've been lucky because in my career, there's a lot of old heads I've worked with and they've passed it down to me. So I'm not saying I'm an old head now, but it's great to be able to pass on my experience to the 2 new distillers.
It's vitally important that the philosophy of the business continues. Now we have 5 members of the 4th generation in the business.
Working for a family business isn't just a job for a small period of time, it's your life's work.
Being part of the Benromach family is special, and we're very proud to do what we do.
It's part of our DNA, in essence, whisky. Some people say it's in our blood. The spirit is, certainly. We are all the different generations, just custodians of a period of time, but there is that wish, that will, that passion to continue making Benromach as a classic Speyside single malt whisky.